The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Staff Sergeant Maria Vasquez stood at attention in the sterile medical bay of Fort Braxton. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from barely contained rage. Around her, a semicircle of male soldiers and medical personnel waited with expressions ranging from smug anticipation to uncomfortable uncertainty. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not like this. Not in front of everyone. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Colonel James Mitchell stood at the back of the room, his weathered face betraying nothing as he observed the proceedings. At 52, he'd seen enough military discipline to know when something felt wrong, but protocol was protocol. The accusation had been made, witnesses had come forward, and now they needed answers. Still, something in his gut churned as he watched the young woman who'd served under his command for 3 years, a soldier he'd come to respect for her unwavering dedication and exceptional service record. The allegation was serious: smuggling contraband onto the base. Someone had reported seeing Maria with suspicious packages, meeting with unknown civilians after hours. In today's military climate, with heightened security concerns and zero-tolerance policies, even the smallest infraction could end a career. But this wasn't small. If true, it could mean court-martial, dishonorable discharge, and potentially federal charges. Dr. Patricia Hendricks, the base's chief medical officer, approached with latex gloves already on her hands. She'd been reluctant to participate in this examination, especially given the circumstances, but orders were orders. The search warrant was specific. They were looking for hidden contraband, possibly taped to the subject's body. It wasn't uncommon for smugglers to use body cavities or tape items to their skin beneath clothing. "Sergeant Vasquez," Dr. Hendricks said, her voice professionally neutral but tinged with discomfort, "you understand why we're here. We need you to remove your uniform for examination." Maria's jaw clenched. She'd been in the military for 8 years, starting as an 18-year-old recruit fresh out of high school in East Los Angeles. She'd worked twice as hard as her male counterparts, proven herself in combat zones, earned commendations for bravery, and had been on track for promotion to Sergeant First Class. Now, standing in this room full of men who seemed more interested in her humiliation than finding the truth, she felt the weight of every struggle she'd faced as a Latina woman in a predominantly white, male institution. "Ma'am, I've already submitted to a standard search. My personal effects have been examined." "I don't understand why." "The search warrant is comprehensive, Sergeant," interrupted Captain Derek Morrison, the base's military police commander. Morrison had never liked Maria. She was too independent, too willing to speak up when she saw injustice. He'd been the one to push hardest for this investigation after receiving the anonymous tip. "Any further delays will be noted in your file as non-compliance with a direct order." The threat was clear. Maria looked around the room, her dark eyes meeting each face. Some looked away, unable to maintain eye contact. Others stared with undisguised curiosity. She recognized most of these men. She'd served alongside them, saved some of their lives in Afghanistan, shared meals and stories and the bonds that form between soldiers in combat. Now they watched her like she was some kind of criminal. Spectacle. Colonel Mitchell shifted uncomfortably. Something about Morrison's eagerness bothered him, but he couldn't put his finger on what. The tip had come through proper channels, the warrant was legitimate, and they had to follow procedure. Still, he'd worked with Maria Vasquez for 3 years. She was one of the most disciplined soldiers he'd ever commanded. Her record was spotless, not even a minor infraction. It didn't make sense. "Sergeant," the colonel said, his voice carrying the authority of his rank, but lacking its usual warmth, "the sooner we complete this examination, the sooner we can all return to our duties." Maria nodded curtly and began unbuttoning her BDU jacket. The room fell silent except for the hum of the air, conditioning, and the distant sounds of base activity beyond the medical bay's walls. As she removed her jacket, revealing the standard issue olive drab t-shirt beneath, she maintained eye contact with Colonel Mitchell. There was something in her gaze, not defiance exactly, but a kind of resigned determination that made him increasingly uncomfortable. The t-shirt came off next, leaving her in a regulation sports bra and uniform pants. Dr. Hendricks conducted a thorough but respectful examination of the clothing, checking seams, pockets, and any area where small items might be concealed. She found nothing. "Continue, Sergeant," Morrison ordered when Maria hesitated. Her boots and socks came off, then her pants. Dr. Hendricks examined each item methodically while Maria stood in regulation underwear, her posture rigid with barely controlled emotion. The doctor's examination revealed nothing suspicious, no hidden compartments, no contraband taped to the inside of clothing. "Ma'am," Maria said to Dr. Hendricks, her voice steady despite the circumstances, "I've complied with your search. My clothing is clean. Can we please conclude this?" But Morrison stepped forward, consulting his copy of the search warrant. The warrant specifies a complete search for contraband concealed on or about the person. That includes a full-body examination. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Even some of the soldiers who'd been watching with interest now looked uncomfortable. Dr. Hendricks frowned, rereading her own copy of the warrant. Morrison was technically correct, but the spirit of the order seemed excessive given what they'd already found, or rather, what they hadn't found. Colonel Mitchell felt his protective instincts flare. This was going too far, but he also knew that if he intervened without proper cause, it could jeopardize his own career and potentially give Maria's defense attorneys grounds to claim the investigation was compromised. "Doctor," he said carefully, "is such an examination medically necessary at this point?" Dr. Hendricks looked between the colonel and Captain Morrison, clearly uncomfortable with the situation she'd been placed in. "Colonel, the warrant does specify." "I know what the warrant specifies," Mitchell interrupted, his patience wearing thin. "I'm asking for your professional medical opinion on its necessity." The tension in the room was palpable. Everyone understood. They were witnessing something that went beyond standard military procedure. This had become personal, though most couldn't understand why or how. Maria Vasquez took a deep breath, her training taking over. She'd survived Taliban ambush in Afghanistan, had carried wounded comrades to safety under enemy fire, had faced down insurgents with nothing but her rifle and her courage. She wouldn't be broken by this humiliation, no matter how orchestrated it seemed. "If this is what it takes to clear my name," she said, her voice carrying across the silent room, "then let's get it over with." Dr. Hendricks approached with professional detachment, but Maria could see the sympathy in the older woman's eyes. The doctor had daughters of her own and understood what this kind of examination meant for a female soldier's dignity and future career prospects. Word of something like this would spread through the base faster than wildfire, regardless of the outcome. As Maria reached behind her back to unclasp her sports bra, Colonel Mitchell found himself studying the faces of the men around him. Morrison watched with undisguised anticipation. Several junior enlisted men seemed fascinated by the proceedings. Others stared at the floor, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to speak up and risk their own careers. The sports bra fell away, and Dr. Hendricks began her examination, checking for anything that might be taped to Maria's torso. Her professional demeanor never wavered, but she worked quickly, understanding the degrading nature of the situation. "Nothing concealed here," she announced to the room. "Continue," Morrison ordered. Maria's hands moved to the waistband of her regulation underwear. This was the moment she'd been dreading: complete exposure in front of men she'd served with, men she'd considered brothers in arms. But as the fabric slipped down her legs, something else was revealed that no one in the room had expected. Colonel Mitchell's eyes widened. Several soldiers gasped audibly. Even Captain Morrison's smug expression faltered as they all stared at Maria's back, covering nearly her entire back. From shoulder blades to the small of her back was an intricate tattoo. But this wasn't some decorative artwork or personal expression. This was something far more significant, something that changed everything about who Maria Vasquez really was. The tattoo depicted a soaring eagle with outstretched wings, clutching a shield bearing the seal of the United States. Beneath it, in bold script, were the words "Death Before Dishonor" and a series of numbers that made Colonel Mitchell's blood run cold. But it was the symbol at the center that caused his sharp intake of breath, the distinctive badge of the Delta Force, the Army's most elite Special Operations Unit. Below that, in smaller but equally precise script, were commendation numbers that Mitchell recognized. Silver Star, Bronze Star with V device for valor, Purple Heart with oak leaf cluster, indicating multiple awards, Combat Infantry Badge, and, at the bottom, a series of coordinates that any military intelligence officer would recognize as locations of classified operations in Afghanistan and Iraq. But there was more. Woven throughout the design were symbols that only someone with extensive knowledge of special operations would understand. A small skull and crossbones indicating sniper qualification. Wings representing halo certification, high altitude low. Opening parachute operations. And most significantly, a small dagger surrounded by lightning bolts, the symbol reserved for the most classified of Delta Force operations. The room fell dead silent. Every person present understood they were looking at something that shouldn't exist. Not on a staff sergeant assigned to routine base operations. Not on someone who, according to all official records, had served in standard infantry units. Colonel Mitchell's mind raced. He'd reviewed Maria Vasquez's personnel file dozens of times over the past 3 years. Standard infantry training at Fort Benning. Deployment to Afghanistan with the 82nd Airborne. Commendations for bravery during several firefights. Good conduct medals. But nothing, absolutely nothing, that would explain the tattoo now displayed. Before them, Dr. Hendricks continued her examination with professional efficiency. But her hands were trembling slightly. She'd been in the military long enough to recognize the significance of what she was seeing. The tattoo wasn't just artwork, it was a permanent record of service that, if authentic, represented some of the most dangerous and classified operations the United States military conducted. "Doctor," Colonel Mitchell's voice was barely above a whisper, "I need you to photograph that tattoo, every detail." "Sir," Captain Morrison interjected, "we're looking for contraband, not..." Captain Mitchell's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "You will be silent until I tell you otherwise." Morrison's mouth snapped shut, but his eyes betrayed his confusion and growing concern. This wasn't going according to his plan at all. Maria remained motionless, allowing the examination to continue. But for the first time since entering the room, a small smile played at the corners of her mouth. After 3 years of hiding, 3 years of accepting assignments beneath her qualifications, 3 years of enduring the subtle and not-so-subtle discrimination that came with being an Hispanic woman in the military, her secret was finally out. Dr. Hendricks completed her examination, finding no contraband whatsoever. "Colonel," she reported, "the subject is clean. No contraband found on her person or clothing." But nobody in the room was thinking about contraband anymore. They were all staring at the tattoo that told a story none of them had expected. Story that was about to turn everything they thought they knew about Staff Sergeant Maria Vasquez completely upside down. As Maria began to dress, Colonel Mitchell's mind worked furiously. If that tattoo was authentic, and something told him it was, then he was looking at one of the most highly decorated and dangerous soldiers in the United States Army, a soldier who'd been hiding in plain sight for reasons he couldn't yet fathom. And if Maria Vasquez was who that tattoo suggested she was, then someone had made a very serious mistake in targeting her with these allegations. "Colonel," Mitchell's hands shook slightly as he stepped closer to get a better look at the tattoo before Maria could fully dress. His mind was connecting dots that painted a picture so extraordinary he almost couldn't believe it. The coordinates tattooed on her back, he recognized one of them. Operation Desert Storm, a classified Delta Force mission that had taken place 7 years ago in the mountains of Afghanistan. A mission he'd only heard whispers about in the highest levels of military intelligence. "Sergeant Vasquez," he said, his voice carrying a respect that hadn't been there moments before. "I need you to step into my office, immediately. Dr. Hendricks. I need copies of those photographs sent to my secure terminal within the hour." "Sir," Captain Morrison stepped forward, his confusion evident. "We still haven't completed the investigation. The search was clean, but we need to interview Captain Morrison." Colonel Mitchell turned to face the military police commander, his expression harder than frozen steel. "You are dismissed from this investigation effective immediately. In fact, you're suspended from duty pending a full review of how this warrant was obtained and why you felt it necessary to push for such an invasive search based on what I'm beginning to suspect was fabricated evidence." Morrison's face went pale. "Sir, I was following proper procedure. The tip came through legitimate channels, and get out." Mitchell's voice boomed through the medical bay, causing several soldiers to jump. "Everyone except Sergeant Vasquez. And Dr. Hendricks out. This room is now classified under national security protocols. Anyone who discusses what they've seen here today will face court-martial for breach of classified information." The room cleared quickly, leaving only the 3 of them. Maria finished dressing, her movements deliberate and controlled. For the first time in 3 years, she stood at full attention, not the routine attention of a regular soldier, but the razor-sharp posture of elite special operations. "Colonel," she said, her voice now carrying an authority that seemed to transform her entirely, "I believe we need to have a conversation." Mitchell nodded, studying her face with new eyes. How had he missed it? The way she moved, the constant vigilance in her eyes, the fact that she never seemed to sleep deeply, never relaxed completely. Signs he should have recognized in a special operations veteran. "Dr. Hendricks," he said without taking his eyes off Maria, "what you've witnessed here today is classified at the highest levels. You will not discuss this with anyone, not your husband, not your staff, not in your personal notes. Am I clear?" "Crystal clear, Colonel," Dr. Hendricks replied, understanding the gravity of the situation, even if she didn't fully comprehend its implications. 20 minutes later, Maria sat across from Colonel Mitchell in his office, the door locked and a white noise generator activated to prevent electronic surveillance. Mitchell had spent the intervening time making secure phone calls to contacts in Army, Intelligence and Special Operations Command. "Sergeant, or should I say Major Elena Santos," Mitchell said, reading from a classified file that had appeared on his secure terminal. Maria's eyes widened slightly. It had been 3 years since anyone had used her real name and former rank. "You did your homework quickly, Colonel." "Major Santos," Mitchell continued reading, age 28, originally from East Los Angeles. Recruited into Army Special Operations at age 21. Delta Force certification at 22. Silver Star for actions during Operation Nightfall. Bronze Star with V device for Operation Desert Storm. Purple Heart for injuries sustained during extraction from compromised position in Kandahar Province. He looked up at her, his expression a mixture of awe and concern. According to this file, Major Elena Santos was killed in action 3 years ago during a classified operation in Syria. Her body was never recovered. Maria Lena leaned back in her chair. "My death was necessary, Colonel. The operation in Syria was compromised. Our entire team was burned. Someone had leaked our identities to hostile forces. I was the only survivor, and barely at that. Army intelligence made the decision to declare me KIA and create a new identity. Maria Vasquez was born from necessity." But why here? Why accept a posting so far below your qualifications and experience? Elena's expression darkened. Because someone in the chain of command wanted me dead, Colonel. The leak in Syria wasn't accidental, it was deliberate. Someone with access to our mission parameters and team composition sold us out. Until we identify who, Elena Santos has to stay dead. Mitchell felt pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. The anonymous tip about contraband smuggling, you think it's connected? I think someone's getting close to figuring out who I really am, Elena said. Captain Morrison's been asking a lot of questions about my background lately. Requesting files, checking my story. Either he's suspicious, or someone's put him up to it. Colonel Mitchell's phone buzzed with a secure message. He read it, his face growing grim. Major, I just received confirmation from SOCOM. There's been increased chatter about a ghost operative in the intelligence community. Someone's been asking questions about surviving members of Operation Desert Storm. Elena stood and moved to the window, her trained eyes automatically scanning for potential threats. It was a habit that had kept her alive through dozens of combat operations. How long do you think I have? That depends, Mitchell said, joining her at the window. How much do you trust me? She studied his face for a long moment. James Mitchell had a reputation as a straight shooter, a commander who put his soldiers' welfare above his own career advancement. But in Elena's world, trust was a luxury that could get you killed. Colonel, in 3 years of serving under your command, you've never given me reason to doubt your integrity. But the people who want me dead have resources and connections that go to the highest levels of government. If I tell you everything, if I trust you with the full truth, you become a target too. Mitchell nodded grimly. Major, I've been in the Army for 30 years. I've seen good soldiers sacrifice for political expedience, and I've seen the system fail people who deserved better. If someone's trying to eliminate you to cover up their crimes, then they've made this personal. Elena turned from the window to face him. There's something else, Colonel. The reason they want me dead isn't just about what happened in Syria. It's about what I discovered there, information that could bring down some very powerful people if it ever came to light. What kind of information? Elena's smile was cold as winter steel. The kind that starts wars, Colonel. And the kind that ends careers. Elena moved away from the window and settled back into her chair, her posture still maintaining that alert readiness that marked veteran special operations personnel. Colonel Mitchell activated another layer of security protocols on his office systems before leaning forward, his full attention focused on the woman he'd known as Maria Vasquez for 3 years. Major Santos, he said, using her real name deliberately. I need to understand what we're dealing with. What did you discover in Syria that someone would kill to keep quiet? Elena's eyes grew distant as she accessed memories she'd spent 3 years trying to suppress. Operation Desert Storm wasn't just about eliminating a high-value target, Colonel. On paper, we were there to take out Halil Assad, a weapons dealer who'd been supplying IEDs to insurgent groups. But that was secondary to our real mission. She paused, seeming to weigh how much to reveal. We were there to retrieve intelligence hard drives, documents, communication records from Assad's compound. Intelligence that allegedly contained information about foreign nationals purchasing weapons from him. Allegedly? What we found was much worse than weapons sales to terrorists, Colonel. Those hard drives contained records of American government officials, high-ranking military officers, Defense Department civilians, even some members of Congress taking payments from Assad in exchange for classified information about troop movements, supply routes, and planned operations. Mitchell felt his blood turn cold. You're talking about treason at the highest levels. I'm talking about a systematic betrayal that cost hundreds of American lives. Elena's voice carried the weight of soldiers lost to enemy action that should never have been possible. Every eye that seemed to find our convoys with impossible accuracy, Every ambush that hit us exactly when we were most vulnerable. Every operation that went sideways because the enemy knew we were coming. It all made sense once we saw those records. The colonel stood and began pacing, his mind reeling from the implications. Who else knew about what you'd found? My team leader, Master Sergeant Rodriguez. Staff Sergeant Williams, our communications specialist. Sergeant First Class Chun, our tech expert. And Captain David Hartwell, our intelligence liaison. Elena's voice hardened. All of them died in Syria when our extraction point was compromised. But you survived. Barely. Elena pulled up the sleeve of her uniform, revealing a series of scars that crisscrossed her forearm. Shrapnel from the RPG that took out our transport. I was thrown clear, managed to crawl into a drainage culvert while the enemy finished off my team. Spent 2 days moving through hostile territory before a Kurdish patrol found me half dead from blood loss. Mitchell stopped pacing and fixed her with an intense stare. Elena, who had access to your extraction coordinates. That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? She smiled grimly. The coordinates were transmitted on a secure channel to exactly 7 people. Our commanding officer at SOCOM, the intelligence officer who briefed us, the pilot of our extraction, Bird, his co-pilot, the Air Force controller managing our airspace, and 2 backup coordinators. Any of those 7 could have leaked the information. Could have, yes, but there's more. Elena reached into her pocket and pulled out a small flash drive, no bigger than her thumb. Before Rodriguez died, he managed to copy some of the most damaging files from Assad's computers. He gave this to me during the firefight, made me promise to get it to the right people if something happened to him. Mitchell stared at the drive as if it were a live grenade. That contains the evidence of American officials taking payments. Names, amounts, dates, bank account numbers, photographs of meetings, audio recordings of conversations, everything needed to prosecute dozens of high-ranking officials for treason. Elena's expression was haunted. Colonel, some of the names on these files, they're people with the power to wage wars or end them. People who could have me eliminated with a phone call and make it look like an accident. Why haven't you turned this over to the appropriate authorities? Elena laughed bitterly. Which authorities, Colonel? How do I know who's compromised and who isn't? The files show payments going to officials in Army intelligence, the CIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, even some FBI personnel. For all I know, turning this over would just be signing my own death warrant. Mitchell sat back down, the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders. So you've been hiding here, serving under an assumed identity, waiting for what? For an opportunity. For the right person to trust. For a way to expose this without ending up in an unmarked grave. Elena met his eyes. I think that opportunity might be you, Colonel. Me? I'm just a base commander. I don't have connections in Washington. I don't have influence with. You have something more valuable than connections, Elena interrupted. You have integrity. In 3 years of serving under you, I've watched how you operate. You put your soldiers first. You don't play political games. And you don't compromise your principles for career advancement. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Mitchell was quiet for a long moment, processing everything Elena had told him. Finally, he spoke. If what you're saying is true, if these files contain evidence of treason at the levels you're describing, then we're not just talking about ending careers. We're talking about potentially destabilizing the entire chain of command. Which is exactly why someone wants me dead, Elena said. As long as I'm alive, as long as this evidence exists, there's always the possibility that the truth will come out. And you think Captain Morrison is connected to this somehow? Elena nodded. Morrison's been too interested in my background, asking too many specific questions. Either he's figured out who I really am, or someone's put him up to investigating. Me. Today's search warrant, it felt like a fishing expedition, like someone was hoping to find something they could use to discredit me, or get me transferred somewhere less secure. Mitchell's secure phone buzzed again. He glanced at the message, and his face went pale. Elena, we may have a bigger problem than we thought. What is it? I just received word that Captain Morrison submitted a request 3 hours ago to have you transferred to Fort Leavenworth for extended interrogation regarding suspected terrorist connections. Elena was on her feet instantly, every muscle in her body coiled for action. Fort Leavenworth? That's maximum security military prison, Colonel. If they get me there, they won't, Mitchell said firmly. I'm denying the transfer request and launching a full investigation into how Morrison obtained his information and why he's targeting you specifically. Colonel, with all due respect, that might not be enough. If Morrison is working for the people who want me dead, they'll find another way. Maybe a training accident, maybe a transfer to another base where security isn't as tight, maybe just an unfortunate incident during a routine patrol. Mitchell looked at the flash drive still sitting on his desk. Elena, if we're going to do this, if we're going to expose these people, we need to do it right. We need allies, we need a plan, and we need to move fast. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we turn the tables. Instead of hiding from these people, instead of waiting for them to make their next move, we go on the offensive. Mitchell's expression hardened with determination. We use that evidence to expose them before they can eliminate you. Elena studied his face carefully. Colonel, if we do this, there's no going back. Once we start down this path, we become targets. 2. Everyone close to us becomes a potential casualty. Major, I've been in the military for 30 years. I've sent good soldiers into harm's way. I've lost friends to enemy action. And I've watched politicians make decisions that cost lives for their own political gain. If there's a chance to expose corruption at this level, to get justice for the soldiers who died because of these traitors, then I'm willing to take that risk. Elena nodded slowly. Then we're going to need help. The kind of help that doesn't officially exist. What do you mean? I mean we're going to have to reach out to some of my old contacts in the special operations community. People who knew Elena Santos. People who have their own reasons to want the truth to come out. Elena's smile was predatory. People who are very good at making problems disappear. That evening, Elena sat in her sparse base quarters, staring at a burner phone she hadn't used in 3 years. The number she was about to call belonged to someone who thought she was dead, someone whose reaction to hearing her voice could go either way. But if Colonel Mitchell was serious about exposing the conspiracy that had killed her team, she needed allies who understood the stakes. She dialed the number and waited. Yeah, the voice was gravelly, suspicious. Ghost Wolf, this is Phoenix Rising. The silence on the other end stretched for nearly 30 seconds. Finally, the voice spoke again, softer now, filled with emotion. Elena, Jesus Christ, we buried you 3 years ago. Hello, Tommy, Elena said, using the real name of the man she'd served with for 4 years in Delta Force. Master Sergeant Thomas Kruger had been her mentor, the soldier who'd taught her half of what she knew about staying alive in hostile territory. Where the hell are you? What happened in Syria? We got word that your entire team was KIA, no survivors. I went to your funeral, Elena. I watched them lower an empty coffin into Arlington National Cemetery. I know. I'm sorry, Tommy. I wanted to reach out, but it wasn't safe. It still isn't safe. What do you need? The question came without hesitation. In the special operations community, loyalty transcended death. I need to know who I can trust. The Syria operation was compromised from the inside. Tommy, someone with high-level access sold us out, and they're still out there. Elena could hear Kruger moving, probably going to a secure location where he could talk freely. Elena, there's been talk in the community. Rumors about Syria, about what your team really found there. Some people think you discovered something big. We did. And now someone's getting close to figuring out that Maria Vasquez and Elena Santos, I may not have much time. Where are you? Fort Braxton, North Carolina. I've been serving under deep cover for 3 years. Fort Braxton? That's Mitchell's command. Jimmy Mitchell's one of the good ones, Elena. If you're going to trust anyone, he's a solid choice. Elena felt a wave of relief. Tommy's endorsement of Colonel Mitchell carried weight. He knows who I really am now, Tommy. He's willing to help. But we're going to need more than good intentions. What kind of help are we talking about? The kind that involves exposing traitors at the highest levels of government. The kind that might require some creative problem-solving if they try to eliminate us before we can act. Another long pause. Elena, you know I'd follow you into hell if you asked. But what you're talking about, it's bigger than just us. We'd need a network. Do we still have one? Some. Rodriguez's brother Carlos is D now. Works organized crime in Miami. Sarah Chun's cousin Kevin is NZ, computer forensics. Williams had a sister in the FBI, counterintelligence division. And there are others, people who knew your team. People who want answers about what really happened in Syria. Elena closed her eyes, thinking of her fallen teammates. Rodriguez, Williams, Chun. They'd all had families. People who'd never gotten the full truth about how they died. Tommy, I need you to reach out to them. Carefully. Don't use normal communication channels. We have to assume that whoever sold U.S. out in Syria is still monitoring for any signs that Elena Santos might be alive. What's your timeline? Fast. I think they're moving against me here. Today they tried to frame me for contraband smuggling, forced a humiliating search in front of half the base personnel. It was designed to discredit me or find an excuse to transfer me somewhere less secure. Understood. Elena, there's something else you should know. 3 months ago, someone broke into Rodriguez's family home in San Antonio. Tore the place apart, but didn't take anything valuable. His mother said they seemed to be looking for something specific. Elena's blood ran cold. Documents? Files? That's what I figured. His family doesn't know about the classified nature of his work, but if someone thought he might have sent them something. They're trying to track down the evidence, Elena realized. Tommy, we may be running out of time faster than I thought. I can be there in 18 hours. Can you stay secure that long? I'll have to, but Tommy, come armed and come ready. If they make a move against me before we can expose them, it's going to get messy. Copy that. Elena ... It's good to hear your voice. We never stopped looking for answers about Syria. I know. That's why I'm trusting you with this. After ending the call, Elena sat in the darkness of her quarters, her mind racing through contingency plans. She'd survived 3 years by staying invisible, by being the perfect anonymous soldier who drew no attention. But now her cover was blown, and the only way forward was to fight. She opened her laptop and began composing an encrypted message to Colonel Mitchell, outlining the resources they'd soon have available and the timeline they were working with. As she typed, she heard footsteps in the hallway outside her door, slow, deliberate, trying to be quiet. Elena instantly killed the laptop screen and moved silently to her window. 3 figures in military fatigues were positioning themselves around the building. This wasn't a routine patrol. This was a coordinated operation. She grabbed her service weapon and spare magazines, her mind automatically shifting into combat mode. It looked like Tommy's 18-hour timeline might be optimistic. Elena Santos was about to make her official. Returned from the dead, and she was going to do it fighting. Moving to her door, she listened carefully to the approaching footsteps. 3 years of hiding were about to end, one way or another. Elena flattened herself against the wall beside her door, weapon drawn and ready. The footsteps had stopped just outside, and she could hear the subtle sound of someone testing the door. Handle. These weren't military police conducting a routine check. This was a tactical team moving with practiced coordination. A soft scraping sound indicated someone was working on the lock. Alina's training took over completely. She moved to her window and carefully peered out through the blinds. 2 more figures were positioned outside, covering potential escape routes. This was a 5-man team minimum, probably 6, conducting what looked like a snatch and grab operation. Her quarters were on the 2nd floor of the barracks, with a 15-foot drop to the ground below. Not impossible, but it would leave her exposed and potentially injured. Better to control the engagement on her terms. Alina quickly moved to her footlocker and retrieved items she'd hoped never to use again: a tactical knife, flashbang grenades she'd kept from her Delta Force days, and a compact submachine gun hidden beneath false bottom panels. Within 30 seconds, she'd transformed from Staff Sergeant Maria Vasquez into Major Elena Santos, elite special operations soldier. The lock clicked open. Elena positioned herself behind her desk, weapon trained on the door. The first figure through was wearing standard military fatigues, but moved with the fluid precision of special operations. Not regular base security, these were professionals. "Clear left," a voice whispered. "Clear right," came the response. Elena waited until the second man entered before making her move. She triggered the flashbang, filling the room with blinding light and deafening noise. In the confusion that followed, she took down the first intruder with a precise shot to the chest center mass. Just as she'd been trained, the second man was turning toward her when she put 2 rounds into his torso. Both men dropped, but Elena knew there were more outside. She had maybe 30 seconds before the rest of the team regrouped and adapted their strategy. Moving to the window, she spotted the overwatch positions: 2 snipers on the adjacent building, 1 spotter on the roof of the motor pool. These weren't base personnel. The equipment was too advanced, the positioning too professional. Someone had sent a military contractor team to eliminate her. Elena's phone buzzed with an incoming call. She answered while keeping her weapon trained on the door. "Major Santos, this is Colonel Mitchell. I just received word that there are unidentified personnel conducting unauthorized operations on my base. Are you secure?" "Negative, Colonel. I've got a tactical team trying to breach my quarters. 2 down, at least 4 more out there. This isn't military police. Someone sent contractors. Hold your position. I'm sending help." "Sir, whoever's behind this has resources and coordination. They may have people inside base security. I can't trust anyone wearing a uniform right now." Through her window, Elena saw movement near the barracks entrance. More figures in tactical gear were setting up a perimeter. This was escalating beyond a simple snatch operation. They were preparing for a full assault. "Colonel, I need you to activate base-wide security protocols and get word to the FBI. If they're willing to conduct a military operation on a U.S. Army base, they're either completely desperate or they have official sanction for this." "Elena, there's something you need to know. 20 minutes ago, Captain Morrison submitted paperwork claiming you'd threatened him and stolen classified materials. He's painting you as a rogue operative who needs to be taken into custody immediately." Elena cursed under her breath. "It's a setup, Colonel. They're creating justification for whatever happens here tonight." An explosion rocked the building as someone breached the main entrance to the barracks. Elena could hear boots pounding up the stairwell. Time was running out. "Colonel, I'm going mobile. If something happens to me tonight, the flash drive in. Your office contains everything needed to expose the people behind this. Get it to someone you trust completely, someone outside the normal chain of command." "Elena, don't do anything." She ended the call and pocketed the phone. Through her door, she could hear multiple footsteps approaching. They weren't being subtle anymore. This had become a direct assault. Elena made her decision. Instead of waiting for them to breach her door, she would go to them. She positioned herself beside the door and waited for the first tactical team to reach her floor. The hallway erupted in gunfire as Elena opened her door and engaged the three-man team moving toward her position. Her training kicked in, completely controlled. Bursts, precise targeting, constant movement. The first man went down before he could react. The second managed to return fire, bullets splintering the doorframe beside Elena's head. She rolled back into her room and came up firing from a different angle, catching the second shooter in the shoulder and spinning him around. The third man had better cover and was laying down, suppressing fire, keeping Elena pinned behind her desk. That's when she heard the helicopter. The sound of rotor blades was getting closer, and Elena realized this operation was even bigger than she'd thought. They'd brought air support. Whatever was on that flash drive, whatever she'd discovered in Syria, it was worth risking a full-scale military operation on U.S. soil to keep it quiet. Elena grabbed her gear and the spare flash drive she'd made as backup. If she was going to survive the next few minutes, she needed to get off this base and disappear again. But first, she had to make sure the evidence survived even if she didn't. She activated the encrypted messaging app on her phone and sent a quick message to Tommy. Kruger, package is at Phoenix Nest. Bird in the air, going dark. Then she destroyed the phone and prepared for the fight of her life. Outside her window, she could see the helicopter circling, searching for landing zones. More vehicles were arriving at the barracks. Whatever happened next, Elena Santos was done hiding. It was time to remind the world why Delta Force operators were considered the most dangerous soldiers on Earth. She checked her weapon one final time and moved toward the window. The 15-foot drop was looking more attractive by the second. Elena didn't hesitate. She kicked out the window screen and rappelled down using bed sheets tied together, a technique she'd perfected during survival training years ago. The 15-foot drop was manageable, and she landed in a combat roll that absorbed most of the impact. Immediately, she heard shouts from above as the tactical team realized their target had gone mobile. Searchlights from the helicopter swept across the area where she'd landed, but Elena was already moving, using the shadows between buildings to mask her position. Her destination was the motor pool, 300 yards away. If she could reach one of the vehicles there, she might have a chance to get off the base before they locked it down completely. But first, she needed to create some chaos to cover her movement. Elena pulled the pin on her last flashbang and threw it toward the main group of tactical personnel gathered near the barracks entrance. The explosion lit up the night and bought her precious seconds as the contractors scrambled to regroup. She sprinted toward the communications building, knowing that cutting base communications would slow down coordination between the assault team and whoever was commanding this operation. Elena's knowledge of Fort Braxton's layout, gained over 3 years of routine service, was now her greatest advantage. The communications building was lightly guarded. 2 regular base security personnel who had no idea they were in the middle of a special operations firefight. Elena approached from their blind spot and neutralized both guards with non-lethal chokeholds. She didn't want to hurt regular Army personnel who were just doing their jobs. Inside the communications center, Elena quickly identified the main transmission equipment. She didn't need to destroy it, just disrupt it long enough to give herself a window of escape. She pulled several key circuit boards and severed fiber optic cables, effectively cutting the base's ability to coordinate with outside agencies. As she worked, her phone buzzed with an incoming text from a number she didn't recognize. Phoenix, this is Angel. Package received. Nest is compromised. Extract Point Charlie in 20 minutes. Angel. Elena smiled grimly as she recognized Tommy Kruger's old call sign. Somehow he'd gotten her message and was already in position to help. Extract Point Charlie was their old designation for the abandoned grain silo 2 miles off Besa, location they'd used during training exercises years ago. But 20 minutes was a lifetime. When professional killers were hunting you, Elena left the communications building and moved toward the motor pool, but the helicopter had repositioned itself directly overhead, its searchlight scanning methodically. She needed a different approach. The base's power substation was 50 yards to her left. If she could create a temporary blackout, it would eliminate the helicopter's effectiveness and give her the cover. She needed to reach the perimeter. Elena made her decision and sprinted toward the electrical facility. Behind her, she could hear the tactical team regrouping and beginning a systematic search pattern. They were professionals, and they wouldn't make the same mistakes twice. The power substation was secured with a chain-link fence and electronic locks. But Elena's Delta Force training had included extensive work with explosives and electrical systems. She planted a small charge on the main transformer and took cover behind a concrete barrier. The explosion plunged half the base into darkness, and the helicopter's searchlight suddenly became the only source of illumination in the area. Perfect. Elena used the confusion to reach the motor pool, where she quickly hotwired a military-grade motorcycle, something fast and maneuverable that could handle off-road terrain. As the engine roared to life, she heard automatic weapons fire from the direction she'd just come from. They were shooting at shadows now, their carefully planned operation deteriorating into chaos. Elena gunned the motorcycle toward the base perimeter. Using maintenance roads and service paths she'd memorized during her 3 years of routine patrols. The darkness was her ally now, and she knew these roads better than the contractors hunting her. Behind her, she could see vehicle headlights beginning to organize into pursuit formations. They'd adapted quickly and were beginning a coordinated chase. The helicopter was also repositioning, trying to regain contact with her. Elena reached the perimeter fence at the base's northeastern boundary, a section that bordered on dense forest and was only lightly patrolled. She ditched the motorcycle and climbed the fence, using wire cutters from the bike's toolkit to create an opening large enough to slip through. As she entered the forest, Elena's phone buzzed again. Phoenix, thermal signature shows 5 vehicles in pursuit. Air support is vectoring to your position. Move to secondary extract point. Secondary extract point was the old water treatment facility, another mile deeper into the forest. Elena began moving through the trees, using terrain and vegetation to mask her heat signature from the helicopter's thermal imaging. The forest was familiar territory. She'd spent countless hours here during off-duty time, hiking and maintaining the fitness levels required for special operations. Now that knowledge was keeping her alive. Elena could hear vehicles at the perimeter fence and voices shouting orders. They were bringing in tracking dogs, which meant her window of escape was closing rapidly. She needed to reach the extract point before they could establish a proper search perimeter. As she moved through the darkness, Elena's mind processed what had just happened. The speed and coordination of the assault told her that whoever was behind this had been planning it for weeks, possibly months. They knew her routines, her quarters assignment, even the base's security protocols. This wasn't just about silencing a witness to Syrian corruption. This was about eliminating a threat to something much bigger. Elena reached a clearing and paused to check her surroundings. In the distance, she could see the lights of search teams beginning to sweep the forest. The helicopter was working a grid pattern, its thermal imaging scanning methodically. Her phone buzzed one final time. Phoenix, package is secure. Clean extraction in T-5 minutes. Blue smoke. Elena pulled out a smoke grenade and prepared to signal her location. After 3 years of hiding, after tonight's firefight that had blown her cover completely, she was finally going to disappear for real. But first, she was going to make sure the truth about Syria and about the traitors who'd killed her team came to light. The sound of approaching vehicles was getting closer. Elena popped the smoke grenade and began moving toward the sound of an approaching helicopter that wasn't broadcasting searchlights. Tommy Kruger had always been good at timing. The helicopter that descended into the clearing wasn't military standard. It was a civilian model, modified for special operations work. As Alina ran toward it through the blue smoke, she could see Tommy Kruger in the co-pilot's seat, his weathered face grim with concentration as he provided overwatch with a high-powered rifle. "Alina, move, move, move," he shouted over the rotor noise. She dove into the passenger compartment, just as automatic weapons fire erupted from the tree line. The contractors had found them. The pilot, a woman Alina didn't recognize, immediately pulled the aircraft into a steep climb while Tommy returned suppressing fire. "Who's flying?" Alina asked, checking her weapons as they gained altitude. "Sarah Chun's cousin, Captain Lisa Park," Tommy replied, never taking his eyes off the ground below. "Army Special Operations Aviation. She's clean," Kevin Chun vouched. For her personally, Alina felt a surge of relief. The network was mobilizing faster than she'd hoped. Status on the package? Secure. "I've got copies of everything you sent, and Kevin's already begun preliminary analysis of the financial records. Alina, what you found in Syria, it's bigger than we thought." The helicopter banked sharply as ground-based searchlights tried to track them. Captain Park was flying evasive maneuvers, using the terrain to break line of sight with pursuit aircraft. "How big?" Alina asked. "Try $800 million in payments to over 40 government officials across 6 agencies. We're not talking about a small corruption ring. This is a systematic compromise of national security that goes back at least 10 years. Alina whistled low. $800 million. That was enough money to buy senators, generals, and agency directors. No wonder someone was willing to risk a military assault on U.S. soil to keep it quiet. Where are we headed?" "Safe house in the Blue Ridge Mountains," Captain Park called from the pilot's seat. "Off-grid facility that officially doesn't exist. We'll have secure communications and enough firepower to hold off a small army." "We might need it," Alina replied, watching the lights of Fort Braxton fade behind them. "Tommy, whoever's behind, this has resources I've never seen before. Military contractors, air support, the ability to fabricate official orders and paperwork. They've got people inside the system at every level." "That's why we're going outside the system," Tommy said. "Alina, I've been in contact with people you haven't seen in years. People who served with your father." Alina's head snapped up. Her father, Colonel Miguel Santos, had been killed in a training accident when she was 15. She'd rarely spoken about him, even to her Delta Force teammates. "My father? Your dad was involved in some very classified operations during the Gulf War. Made some friends in the intelligence community who never forgot him. When word got out that his daughter might be alive and in trouble, some very interesting people volunteered to help." The helicopter settled into a steady flight pattern, heading north toward the mountains. Alina could see other aircraft in the distance, probably search helicopters from Fort Braxton, but they were falling behind. "Tommy, I need to know exactly who we're dealing with. The attack tonight was too coordinated, too well informed. Someone with intimate knowledge of base operations planned that assault. We're working on it. Kevin's running deep background checks on everyone who had access to your service records. Anyone who's been asking questions about Maria Vasquez's assignment history. We should have preliminary results by the time we reach the safe house." Alina leaned back in her seat, finally allowing herself to feel the exhaustion that came after combat adrenaline faded. She'd been running on pure instinct and training for the past hour, but now reality was setting in. "How many people know I'm alive now?" Small circle. Kevin Chun, Carlos Rodriguez, Agent Jennifer Williams from the FBI. That's Rodriguez's sister-in-law, and a few others with security clearances that go above top secret. Everyone's been vetted by people your father trusted. "And Colonel Mitchell? He's clean." Kevin ran a full background on him. 30 years of service, spotless record, no unusual financial activity, no connections to any of the people on your Syria list. He's exactly what he appears to be, a straight arrow officer who puts his soldiers first. Elena felt a wave of relief. She'd grown to respect Colonel Mitchell over the past 3 years, and learning that her instincts about him were correct meant they might have an ally inside the official chain of command. What's his status now? Under protective surveillance. Kevin's people are watching him discreetly, making sure nobody tries to eliminate him as a witness. The flash drive he has is now the only official copy of the Syria intelligence and government. Hands. The helicopter began its descent toward a dark mountain valley. Elena could see a small cluster of buildings nestled in the trees, the safe house that would serve as their base of operations while they planned their next move. "Elena," Tommy said as they prepared to land, "there's something else you need to know. The Syria files don't just show payments to American officials. There are records of weapons sales to terrorist organizations that were approved at the highest levels. We're talking about a deliberate policy of arming enemies of the United States for profit." Elena closed her eyes. It was worse than she'd thought. Not just corruption, but actual collaboration with terrorist organizations. The implications were staggering. "How long do we have before they track us here?" "This location is off all official maps. Only a handful of people know it exists. And they're all people your father saved during black operations in Central America. We should be secure for at least 48 hours. That's not much time to expose a conspiracy this size." Tommy smiled grimly as the helicopter touched down. "Elena, you've been dead for 3 years. The people responsible for Syria think they've won. Think they're safe. They're about to learn that Elena Santos doesn't stay buried." As they exited the aircraft, Elena could see figures moving in the shadows around the building's security personnel, all carrying weapons and moving with military precision. The cavalry had indeed arrived. The safe house was more sophisticated than Elena had expected. Hidden beneath what appeared to be an abandoned mining facility was a state-of-the-art operations center complete with secure communications, computer analysis stations, and enough weapons to equip a small military unit. "Welcome to Ghost Station," Tommy said as they descended into the underground facility. "Your father helped establish this place back in 1991 as a contingency site for operations that needed to stay off the books." Elena looked around in amazement. The main operations room contained multiple computer terminals, large wall-mounted displays showing real-time intelligence feeds, and communication equipment that rivaled anything she'd seen in official military facilities. How is this funded? Let's just say that some very wealthy individuals have reasons to ensure that certain types of operations can continue even when official channels become compromised, replied a voice from across the room. Elena turned to see a man in his 60s approaching, tall, distinguished, with silver hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to command. She didn't recognize him, but something about his presence suggested significant authority. "Major Santos, I'm General Harrison Blake, retired. I served with your father during Operation Just Cause in Panama. He saved my life twice, and I've never forgotten the debt." Elena snapped to attention instinctively. Even retired, Blake commanded respect. "At ease, Major. We're not operating under normal military protocol here." Blake gestured toward the bank of computer screens where a young Asian man was working intently. "Kevin Chun has been analyzing your Syria intelligence for the past 4 hours. What he's found is worse than any of us anticipated." Kevin looked up from his terminal, his face grave. "Elena, the financial records you recovered don't just show corruption. They show a systematic program of using terrorist organizations as proxies for American foreign policy objectives that couldn't be pursued through official channels." Elena moved closer to examine the data on Kevin's screens. Lists of names, bank account numbers, dates. And payment amounts created a web of corruption that extended throughout the government. "Show me," she said. Kevin pulled up a series of documents on the main display. These records show that certain officials in the Defense Department, CIA, and State Department were not just taking bribes from arms dealers, they were actually directing weapons sales to specific terrorist organizations as part of covert operations. Covert operations authorized by whom? "That's where it gets complicated," General Blake interjected. "The authorizations appear to come from a group calling itself the Strategic Oversight Committee, a body that doesn't officially exist in any government organizational chart." Alina studied the documents, her Delta Force training in intelligence analysis helping her understand the implications. They created a shadow command structure, a way to conduct operations without congressional oversight or official accountability. Exactly. And when operations went wrong, when American soldiers died because of intelligence leaks or enemy forces equipped with American weapons, the official command structure had plausible deniability. Tommy joined them at the main display. "Elena, we've identified at least 12 operations over the past decade where American casualties can be directly linked to weapons or intelligence provided through this shadow network." Elena felt her anger building. Her teammates in Syria, the soldiers who died in ambush that seemed impossibly well coordinated, the IED attacks that found American convoys with deadly precision, all of it could be traced back to this conspiracy. "Do we have enough evidence to prosecute?" Kevin nodded. "Financial records, communication intercepts, photographs of meetings, even audio recordings of planning sessions. The Syria intelligence you recovered is incredibly comprehensive. Then why haven't we turned this over to the Justice Department?" "General," Blake's expression darkened, "because we don't know how deep the corruption goes. The Justice Department, the FBI, even federal judges, any of them could be compromised. If we turn this over through normal channels, it disappears forever and everyone involved in exposing it ends up dead." Elena understood. They were dealing with a conspiracy so extensive that normal law enforcement couldn't be trusted. "So what's the alternative?" "We go public," Blake said. "Multiple media outlets simultaneously, with enough documentation that it can't be suppressed or discredited. Full exposure, all at once, with protections for the sources." "That's incredibly dangerous," Elena pointed out. "The moment this goes public, everyone involved becomes a target." "We're already targets," Tommy replied. "The question is whether we're going to be targets who go down fighting or targets who get eliminated quietly." Kevin pulled up another screen showing real-time intelligence feeds. "Elena, since your escape from Fort Braxton 6 hours ago, there's been a massive increase in communication traffic between Defense Department officials, CIA stations, and private military contractors. They're mobilizing resources on a scale I've never seen before." "What kind of resources?" "Tracking teams, surveillance assets, cyber warfare capabilities. They're treating this like a national security emergency." Elena laughed bitterly. "Because it is a national security emergency for them. If this evidence becomes public, it doesn't just end careers. It could bring down the current administration and lead to criminal charges against dozens of high-ranking officials." General Blake activated a secure communication system, which is why we need to move fast. "I've been in contact with investigative journalists at 5 major news organizations, people who've spent years investigating government corruption and have secure protocols for protecting sources. How long before we can go public?" 48 hours. We need time to prepare comprehensive packages for each outlet, ensure they have authentication protocols, and establish security for everyone involved. Elena nodded, but her mind was already racing ahead to the challenges they'd face. "General, they're going to come at us with everything they have. Military contractors, cyber attacks, character assassination, possibly even direct military action, disguising as counter-terrorism operations. I know. That's why we're not just going to expose them, we're going to fight them. Blake gestured toward another section of the facility. Elena, I want you to meet the rest of our team. As they moved through the underground complex, Elena was introduced to a group of individuals unlike any she'd encountered in her military career. Former special operations personnel, retired intelligence officers, investigative journalists, and computer specialists, all united by personal reasons to want the truth exposed. This is Agent Rachel Morrison, FBI, but not the same Morrison from your base, Blake explained. She's been investigating arms trafficking for 5 years and has her own files on many of the people in your Syria intelligence. Agent Morrison, a woman in her 40s with intense green eyes, shook Elena's hand firmly. Major Santos, I've been trying to connect the dots on this conspiracy for years. What you found in Syria is the missing piece that makes everything else make sense. And this is Dr. Michael Reeves, investigative journalist. He spent the last decade exposing government corruption and has the security protocols to protect sources even under federal investigation. Dr. Reeves was younger than Elena had expected, maybe mid-30s, with the intense focus of someone accustomed to dangerous work. Major, I've already begun preliminary research on the names in your files. The scope of this conspiracy is unprecedented in American history. Elena looked around at the faces surrounding her, people who'd risked their careers and lives to gather in this hidden facility. How many people are we talking about in total? Counting support staff, security personnel, and technical specialists, we have about 30 people involved in various aspects of this operation, Blake replied. All of them vetted personally by people your father trusted. Kevin Chun pulled up a new display showing a complex organizational chart. Elena, based on the Syria files and our additional research, we've identified the core conspiracy as involving 43 individuals across 6 government agencies, plus an unknown number of private contractors and foreign nationals. Elena studied the chart, recognizing some names from her years in special operations. Some of these people, I've served under their command. They've been trusted with the lives of American soldiers. And they've betrayed that trust for money, Tommy sighed grimly. Elena, we estimate that the operations directed by this shadow committee have resulted in the deaths of over 300 American service members and at least 2,000 foreign civilians. The weight of those numbers settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Elena thought of her teammates who died in Syria, of the countless other soldiers who'd walked into ambushes orchestrated by the very officials who were supposed to protect them. What's our timeline for the media release? Dr. Reeves consulted his tablet. 48 hours to coordinate with all outlets simultaneously. We need comprehensive documentation packages, authentication protocols, and security measures for everyone. And in the meantime? General Blake's expression was grim. In the meantime, we prepare for war. Because the moment this story breaks, everyone in this room becomes a target for elimination. 24 hours later, the underground facility buzzed with intense activity. Elena sat at a computer terminal, putting the finishing touches on her personal testimony, a detailed account of the Syria operation, the death of her team, and the 3 years she'd spent in hiding while the people responsible continued their treasonous activities. Elena, Kevin called from across the room, we've got movement on the surface. Satellite imagery shows vehicles approaching from multiple directions. Elena looked up at the main display, which now showed real-time surveillance feeds from cameras hidden throughout the mountain area. 6 black SUVs were winding their way up the access roads, moving in a coordinated pattern that suggested military precision. How did they find us? Tommy asked, checking his weapons. Doesn't matter now, General Blake replied, his voice calm despite the circumstances. Kevin, what's the status on the media packages? 90% complete. We need another 6 hours to finalize authentication protocols and ensure secure delivery to all outlets simultaneously. Elena stood and moved to the weapons locker. Then we buy ourselves 6 hours. Agent Morrison was monitoring communication intercepts on her equipment. Elena, I'm picking up encrypted communications between the approaching vehicles and what sounds like a command post. They're not planning to take prisoners. How many? Minimum 30 personnel, possibly more. Military-grade equipment, including what sounds like heavy weapons and surveillance drones. Elena checked her rifle and began loading magazines. General, do we have defensive positions prepared? The facility was designed to withstand siege warfare. Multiple escape routes, independent power and water supplies, and enough ammunition to hold off a battalion for weeks if necessary. Dr. Reeves looked up from his computer where he'd been preparing the final media releases. General, if we're about to be under attack, shouldn't we accelerate the timeline? Get the story out now rather than risk having it suppressed? Blake shook his head. If we release incomplete packages, they'll discredit the entire story as fabricated. Intelligence. We need the full documentation, properly authenticated, or this will all be for nothing. Elena moved to one of the defensive positions overlooking the facility's main entrance. Through reinforced windows, she could see the first of the black SUVs reaching the outer perimeter. Tommy, remember Bosnia? When we held that observation post for 18 hours against overwhelming odds. Tommy grinned as he took position at another window. I remember. But this time we've got better equipment and more to fight for. Kevin's voice came over the intercom system. Elena, I'm monitoring their communications. They're planning a coordinated assault in T-minus 15 minutes. Multiple entry points, explosive breaches, the full package. Authentication on the media files? Still processing. The financial records are so extensive that verification is taking longer than expected. Elena keyed her radio. All positions, this is Phoenix. Remember, we're not just fighting for our lives here. We're fighting for every soldier who died because of the traitors we're exposing. Hold the line. The next few minutes passed in tense silence as the assault team positioned themselves around the facility. Elena could see figures moving through the trees, setting up sniper positions and preparing breaching charges. They're professionals, Agent Morrison observed, watching the tactical deployment through her scope. Military contractors, probably the same team that hit Fort Braxton. Good, Elena replied. Then they'll understand what they're up against when we start shooting back. The first explosion came at exactly 1:47 a.m. as breaching charges detonated. Simultaneously at 3 different entry points. The facility's defensive systems activated automatically, sealing blast doors and switching to internal power and communications. Elena engaged the first assault team as they breached the main entrance. Her training and experience allowing her to maintain superior fire discipline despite being outnumbered. Around her, the other defenders held their positions with professional calm. Kevin, status on the files? Authentication complete on 80% of the documentation. I need another 2 hours for full verification. An explosion rocked the facility as someone detonated charges against the main blast door. Elena could hear the sound of cutting torches beginning work on the reinforced barriers. They're really committed to stopping this, Tommy observed, dropping 2 more attackers. With precise sniper fire. Because they know that if this story gets out, it's over for all of them, Elena replied, reloading her weapon. Prison sentences, congressional investigations, the collapse of their entire shadow network. Agent Morrison's voice came over the radio. Elena, I'm monitoring communications between the assault team and their command post. They've been ordered to recover all digital files and eliminate all witnesses, no survivors. Elena smiled grimly. Then they clearly don't understand who they're dealing with. The battle continued for 3 hours, with the assault teams making repeated attempts to breach the facility's defenses. Elena's group held them off through superior positioning, better knowledge of the terrain, and the desperate motivation of people fighting for something larger than themselves. As dawn broke over the Blue Ridge Mountains, Kevin's voice finally came over the intercom with the words they'd all been waiting for. All files authenticated and uploaded. Media packages transmitted to all outlets simultaneously. The story breaks in 30 minutes on 5 different networks. Elena keyed her radio for the last time. All positions, this is Phoenix. Mission accomplished. The truth is out there now. And there's nothing they can do to stop it. Outside, the sounds of combat began to fade as the assault teams realized their mission had failed. Elena Santos had done what she'd been trained to do: complete the mission, regardless of personal cost. The conspiracy that had killed her teammates in Syria was about to be exposed to the world. At 6:30 a.m. Eastern Time, newsrooms across America simultaneously broke the biggest military corruption story in decades. Elena watched from the underground facility as Dr. Michael Reeves appeared on 5 different networks, presenting the Syria intelligence with methodical precision. What you're seeing here, Dr. Reeves explained to CNN's morning anchor, represents systematic treason at the highest levels of government. Financial records showing $800 million in payments to 43 officials across 6 agencies, all in exchange for classified intelligence that was then sold to arms dealers and terrorist organizations. Elena felt a surge of satisfaction as she watched the carefully prepared evidence being presented to the American people. Bank records, photographs of secret meetings, audio recordings of planning sessions, everything needed to prove the conspiracy. Beyond any doubt, on another screen, Agent Rachel Morrison was being interviewed by NBC, explaining how the FBI had been investigating arms trafficking patterns that suddenly made sense with the release of the Syria files. "We've been tracking unusual weapons flows to terrorist organizations for 5 years," Morrison explained. What Major Santos discovered in Syria provides the missing connections that explain how American weapons consistently ended up in enemy hands with such deadly precision. Kevin Chen monitored social media and news feeds, watching as the story exploded across the internet. "Elena, it's trending worldwide. #Syria Files is the #1 hashtag globally, and every major news outlet is picking up the story." Tommy joined Elena at the monitors, his weathered face showing the first signs of hope she'd seen in days. "Look at that," he said, pointing to a Fox News segment where a retired general was expressing outrage at the betrayal of American soldiers. "These aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet," the general was saying. "Every dollar that changed hands represents American lives lost, operations compromised, and the systematic betrayal of our oath to protect and defend." Elena's secure phone buzzed with an incoming call. The display showed it was Colonel Mitchell. "Colonel," she answered. "Elena, I'm watching the news coverage. My God, the scope of this. I had no idea it went so deep. How are things at Fort Braxton?" "Chaos. Captain Morrison was arrested 2 hours ago by federal agents. Turns out he's been receiving payments from one of the contractors mentioned in your files. The entire base is under federal investigation." Elena felt a grim satisfaction. Morrison's targeting of her now made perfect sense. He'd been trying to eliminate a threat to his paymasters. "Colonel, what's your status? Are you safe?" "For now. The FBI has me under protective custody while they sort through everything. Elena, there's something else you should know. I've been contacted by the Senate Intelligence Committee. They want to schedule hearings, and they specifically requested your testimony." Elena looked around at her companions in the underground facility. The immediate battle was over, but the larger war for accountability was just beginning. "Colonel, I'll testify, but only under specific conditions. Full immunity for everyone who helped expose this conspiracy, and protection for the sources who made it possible. I think that can be arranged." Elena, you should also know that the President has ordered a full investigation by a special prosecutor. This is going to go all the way to the top." After ending the call, Elena turned to General Blake. "General, what happens now?" "The story's out, but the people responsible still have enormous resources and influence." Blake was monitoring intelligence feeds from his contacts throughout the government. "Elena, in the past 6 hours, we've seen unprecedented activity. Resignations, arrests, emergency meetings at the highest levels. The conspiracy is collapsing, but it's going to fight back with everything it has." As if to prove his point, Kevin's voice came over the intercom. "Everyone, we've got incoming surveillance drones, at least 4 of them, circling the facility." Elena moved to the defensive positions, but something felt different this time. "Tommy, those aren't attack drones. They're surveillance platforms." "Confirmed," Agent Morrison said, studying the technical readouts. "Law enforcement surveillance, not military contractors. We've got federal agencies establishing a perimeter around the facility." Elena's phone rang again. This time the caller ID showed FBI headquarters. "Major Santos, this is Director Patricia Hayes, FBI. I need to speak with you immediately." "Director, I'm listening." "Major, based on the evidence you've provided, we have arrest warrants for 37 individuals and search warrants for locations across 6 states. But we need your cooperation to ensure these prosecutions stick." Elena looked at her companions, all of whom had risked everything to expose the truth. "Director, I'm willing to cooperate, but I have conditions." "Name them." "Full immunity for everyone involved in exposing this conspiracy, protection for sources and witnesses, and assurance that this investigation won't be buried or compromised by political pressure." "Major, you have my word. This investigation has the full support of the President and congressional leadership from both parties. The American people deserve answers, and the people responsible for this betrayal will face justice." Elena felt something she hadn't experienced in 3 years, hope that justice might actually be possible. "Director, I'll surrender myself to federal custody, but I'm coming in with my attorney and full documentation of everything we've discovered." "Agreed. Major Santos, on behalf of the American people, thank you for your service and your courage in exposing this conspiracy." As Elena prepared to leave the underground facility that had been her sanctuary, Tommy placed a hand on her shoulder. "Elena, your father would be proud. You've honored the oath that those bastards betrayed." Elena nodded, thinking of her fallen teammates and the countless other soldiers who died because of the conspiracy they'd just exposed. "The hardest part is over. Tommy, now comes the real work, making sure justice is actually served." 6 months later, Elena sat in a federal courthouse in Washington, D.C., wearing her full military dress uniform with all the decorations her tattoo had revealed. The Silver Star, Bronze Star with V device, Purple Heart, and Combat Infantry Badge gleamed on her chest as she prepared to give testimony that would determine the fate of the largest treason prosecution in American history. The courtroom was packed with media, family members of soldiers killed in operations compromised by the conspiracy, and government officials from the highest levels. In the defendants section sat 34 individuals: generals, colonels, CIA officers, Defense Department officials, and private contractors, all facing charges of treason, conspiracy, and the deaths of American service members. "Major Elena Santos," the federal prosecutor began, "please tell the court about the mission that led you to discover this conspiracy." Elena looked directly at the defendants as she spoke, her voice clear and unwavering. "Your Honor, in 2019, my Delta Force team was deployed to Syria on what we believed was a routine elimination mission. Our target was Halil Assad, an arms dealer supplying weapons to terrorist organizations. What we discovered instead was evidence of systematic treason by American officials." She spent the next 4 hours detailing the Syria operation, the deaths, of her teammates, and the 3 years she'd spent gathering evidence while hiding under an assumed identity. The courtroom was silent except for the occasional gasp from spectators as the full scope of the betrayal became clear. Major Santos, the defense attorney for one of the generals, attempted during cross-examination, "Isn't it convenient that you're the only survivor of this alleged Syria operation? How do we know your testimony isn't fabricated?" Elena smiled coldly. "Counselor, the evidence speaks for itself. Bank records, communication intercepts, photographs, audio recordings, all independently verified by multiple federal agencies. My survival doesn't make the evidence any less damning." The prosecutor stood for redirect examination. "Major Santos, can you tell the court about the impact this conspiracy had on American military operations?" Elena's voice carried the weight of personal loss as she responded. "Your Honor, based on the intelligence we recovered and subsequent investigations, we estimate that over 300 American service members died in operations that were compromised by information sold to our enemies. Thousands more were wounded. The defendants didn't just betray their oaths, they directly caused the deaths of the soldiers they were sworn to protect." In the gallery, Elena could see family members of fallen soldiers, some crying, others staring at the defendants with expressions of profound anger and betrayal. The trial lasted 3 months, with witness after witness corroborating Elena's testimony. Tommy Kruger testified about the rescue operation and the network of veterans who'd helped expose the conspiracy. Kevin Chun presented technical analysis of the financial records. Agent Morrison detailed the FBI's parallel investigations that confirmed the Syria intelligence. Colonel Mitchell, now promoted to Brigadier General as recognition for his role in supporting the investigation, testified about Elena's exemplary service record and his observations of the attempted cover-up at Fort Braxton. "General Mitchell," the prosecutor asked, "in your 30 years of military service, have you ever encountered a case of betrayal at this scale?" "Never," Mitchell replied firmly. "The systematic nature of this conspiracy, the willingness to sacrifice American lives for profit, represents the most serious breach of military honor I've ever encountered." When the verdicts came down, 32 of the 34 defendants were found guilty on all charges. The courtroom erupted as families of fallen soldiers finally heard the word "guilty" applied to the people responsible for their loved ones' deaths. Elena felt a deep sense of satisfaction as she watched the defendants being led away in handcuffs. Master Sergeant Rodriguez, Staff Sergeant Williams, Sergeant First Class Chun, and Captain Hartwell could finally rest in peace. Outside the courthouse, Elena was approached by a reporter from CNN. "Major Santos, how does it feel to finally see justice served?" Elena looked back at the courthouse where the people who'd killed her teammates had just been convicted of treason. "It feels like the beginning of healing, not just for me, but for all the families who lost loved ones to this conspiracy. Justice has been served, but the work of rebuilding trust in our institutions is just beginning. What's next for you, Major?" Elena smiled for the first time in years. "I've been offered my choice of assignments by the Army. I think I'd like to train the next generation of Special Operations soldiers, teach them not just how to fight, but how to maintain the honor and integrity that these defendants abandoned." As Elena walked down the courthouse steps, Tommy Kruger fell into step beside her. "So Phoenix, ready for the next mission?" Elena looked up at the clear Washington sky, thinking of her father, her fallen teammates, and the oath she'd taken to protect and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. "Always ready, Ghost Wolf, always ready." 2 years after the conclusion of the treason trials, Major Elena Santos stood before a formation of Delta Force candidates at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. The training facility had been renamed the Rodriguez-Williams-Chun-Hartwell Special Operations Training Center in honor of her fallen teammates, and Elena served as its commanding officer. "Warriors," she addressed the candidates, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd faced the ultimate test of loyalty and courage. You're here because you've demonstrated exceptional skill, courage, and dedication. But skill and courage alone are not enough. What separates a true special operations soldier from a merely competent one is integrity, the willingness to do what's right, even when it costs you everything. In the audience, she could see familiar faces. Tommy Kruger, now a Master Sergeant Instructor. Kevin Chun, who'd left the NSA to become a cybersecurity consultant specializing in protecting whistleblowers. General Blake, who'd come out of retirement to serve on congressional oversight committees ensuring that the intelligence community remained accountable to the American people. Elena's story had become legend within the special operations community, the soldier who died and returned from the grave to expose the greatest betrayal in military history. But she knew the real heroes were the people who'd risked everything to help her expose the truth. After the formation dismissed, Elena walked to the memorial wall that honored all special operations personnel killed in action. 4 new names had been added in a place of honor: Rodriguez, Williams, Chun, and Hartwell. Their sacrifice had not been forgotten. Major Santos? Elena turned to see a young lieutenant approaching Maria Vasquez, who joined the Army after being inspired by Elena's story, and had specifically requested assignment to Elena's training command. Yes, Lieutenant? Ma'am, I wanted to thank you for showing us that even when the system fails, individual integrity can still make a difference. Elena smiled, remembering her own idealistic enthusiasm as a young soldier. Lieutenant, the system is only as strong as the people who serve it. Our job is to ensure that the next generation understands that honor isn't just a word, it's a way of life. As the sun set over Fort Bragg, Elena received a call from Dr. Michael Reeves, the journalist who'd helped break the Syria Files story. Elena, I wanted to let you know that the last of the appeals were denied today. All 32 convictions stand. They're all going to serve their full sentences. Elena felt a deep satisfaction. Justice had been served completely. Michael, what about the institutional reforms? Better than we hoped. Congress passed the Military Intelligence Oversight Act, requiring independent audits of all covert operations. The Pentagon established the Integrity Division, with authority to investigate corruption at any level. And the President signed the Whistleblower Protection Enhancement Act, making it easier for service members to report wrongdoing without fear of retaliation. After ending the call, Elena walked to her office, where she kept a framed photo of her original Delta Force team, the brothers and sisters she'd lost in Syria. Their deaths had not been in vain. On her desk was a letter from the families of soldiers who died in operations compromised by the conspiracy. They'd established a foundation providing scholarships for children of fallen service members, and they'd asked Elena to serve on the board of directors. Elena picked up her pen and wrote her acceptance. She thought of her father, Colonel Miguel Santos, who'd instilled in her the values that had guided her through the darkest period of her life. She thought of Master Sergeant Rodriguez, who'd pressed the flash drive into her hands as he died, making her promise to expose the truth. She thought of the countless soldiers who died because of the conspiracy, and the families who'd finally received answers about their loved ones' deaths. Her personal phone buzzed with a text message from Tommy Kruger. Phoenix, remember what you told me 3 years ago about being ready for the next mission? Well, I just got word that there might be another conspiracy involving defense contractors and congressional oversight committees. Interested? Elena smiled as she typed her response. Ghostwolf, some missions never end. Send me the details. Because that's what Elena Santos did. She served. She protected. She exposed corruption and fought for justice, no matter the personal cost. The tattoo on her back told the story of her decorations and achievements, but the real story was written in the lives she'd saved, the truth she'd exposed, and the honor she'd restored to the uniform she wore. As she prepared to leave her office, Elena paused at her window overlooking the training grounds, were the next generation of special operations. Soldiers were learning to serve with honor. The conspiracy that had killed her teammates was over, the traitors were in prison, and the system had been reformed to prevent future betrayals. But Alina knew that the price of freedom was eternal vigilance, and there would always be another mission, another threat to confront, another battle for justice to fight. She straightened her uniform, checked her weapons, and prepared for whatever came next. Because that's what warriors do. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.